Thank you, Chair. Mr. Nene, we were at paragraph 7 of your statement. You would have at some stage read the news report or the news reports to which we made reference earlier today, and particularly the statement regarding your alleged role in the PIC.
That's correct.
Did you speak to your son about those allegations once you had read the reports?
Indeed, I did speak to him, and he assured me that he never received any benefit from the Public Investment Corporation. And went on also.
Did you discuss his alleged partner, Mr. Mirza?
Yes, we did, and he did indicate that Mirza might have benefited, but the extent of the benefit is unknown to me because it was now through his company where my son was not involved.
Right. Did he tell you what his relationship was with any business in which Mr. Mirza might have been involved when Mr. Mirza might have received funding from the PIC?
Look, the relationship originally when they applied for funding was that they were partners, but when it reached a point of whatever benefit might have accrued to Mirza, my son was no longer party to that.
So did your son break with Mr. Mirza?
Yes, from the company that was doing business.
Yes. Did you receive a communication from the Public Protector during October 2018?
That is correct. I did receive a complaint from the Public Protector.
And did that complaint, or did the communication refer to a complaint received from the Democratic Alliance, particularly Mr. David Mania?
That is correct.
Do you look at Annexure NN1, please, which is on page 16.
Yes,
that is a letter which appears to come from the Public Protector's Office, addressed to yourself, and it's dated, as most public documents or communications are dated at the end, 24 October 2018. That appears on page 18.
That's correct.
Yes, the complaint, might as well just go there, is in paragraphs 3 and 4, which read, in his letter of complaint, Mr. Mania alleged that, quote, I am writing to request an investigation in terms of Section 4.2 of the Executive Members Ethics Act into the conduct of the Minister of Finance, Untitled Nene, whose son, Siyabonga Nene, allegedly may have benefited from an investment made by the Public Investment Corporation. Paragraph 4 reads, Mr. David Mania also stated in his letter of complaint that, quote, the Minister was variously the Finance Minister, Deputy Finance Minister and Chairperson of the Public Investment Corporation at the time his son allegedly may have benefited from the investment made by the Public Investment Corporation. And so the question put to you, in essence, appears at page 17 of the bundle at paragraph 6.2, an indication whether you had any involvement and or influence in the granting of an investment by the PIC to your son, Mr. Siyabonga Nene, and or Mr. Muhammad Amir Mirza, and or any entities or companies related to Mr. Siyabonga Nene and Mr. Muhammad Amir Mirza. That is the communication received in relation to an investigation conducted by the Public Protector. Did you respond?
Indeed, I did respond, Commissioner, and the response is also attached as Annexure NN2.
You responded in writing?
I did, yes.
Did you attempt to respond in any other way?
In the letter, the public protector had indicated that she would be amenable also to a one-on-one engagement, and I had preferred that because I thought that would answer all the questions. But then she felt that perhaps I just need to respond in writing. If there is a need for a one-on-one, we would be able to do that.
Did you ever have a one-on-one meeting?
No, we did not, since she was not available for a one-on-one, but I submitted the written response.
Would you look at page 19, annexure NN2, please?
That's correct.
Is that your response?
That is my response, sir.
It reads in paragraph 2 or 3, during my tenure as the Deputy Minister of Finance and the Chairperson of the Public Investment Corporation, I in no way tried to influence the investment process and decision regarding the PIC's consideration of investment in Mozambique Oil Refinery or its funding of the equity participation of Mr. Amir Mirza and Mr. Siyabonga Neni via India Frek Trade and Investment Pty Limited or any other investment for that matter. Now, was that information regarding the partnership or the equity participation of your son and Mr. Mirza your recordal, or was that the public protector's recordal of the position?
There was the allegation, but also what I was stating in the letter was that I had not tried to influence the investment process into this company at all.
Well, did you know of India Frek Trade and Investments Pty Limited or any investment in the Mozambique oil refinery by a concern in which both Mirza and Siyabonga Neni had equity?
Indeed, I had been informed later after my departure from the PIC as chairperson.
At the time, it is alleged to have been made?
At the time, no.
Right. What did your son tell you about the allegation in the paragraph above?
He informed me that he derived no benefit from the investment by the PIC in the oil refinery, and also that subsequent to them having applied for financing, he had also resigned from that company, but also whatever benefit might have accrued would have accrued to the company that his partner alone was.
Do you know whether that company in which Mr. Mirza had equity ever received a benefit from the Public Investment Corporation?
I am not sure, sir.
Did you then invite the Public Protector to engage the PIC directly on the matter?
Absolutely.
And you offer in the last paragraph or the penultimate paragraph to meet with the Public Protector?
That is correct.
The communication that we've just referred to is dated 26 November 2018. Do you see that? That's on page 19.
Yes, the NN2 document.
Since then, have you heard anything further from the Public Protector?
Indeed, I did receive an acknowledgement of receipt from the Office of the Public Protector, I think 2 days after that, which I think it's NN3.
Right. In that document, on behalf of the Public Protector, you are thanked for your assistance. Has anything transpired since?
No, nothing, sir.
All right, let's move on to paragraph 11, please. Annexure A is dealt with in that paragraph and the paragraphs that follow, and Annexure A appears at page 50. We've summarized the allegations in that already. Generally speaking, what do you say about the allegations made on page 50?
So,
and on the following pages up to page 52.
categorically, I deny all the allegations made in Annex 1 of this Commission's questions. And I truly can only describe this report and social media commentary as baseless and unfounded.
All right. It's a rather general allegation, but requires a response nevertheless. You were alleged to have had meetings with, quote, dodgy business people, unquote, and the EFF states that it has a record of these meetings. What is your response to that?
Again, my response is simply that I never had any meetings with those dodgy business people, and I invite the EFF to provide such evidence to the Commission and to myself.
What about the allegation concerning Iqbal Survey and the independent group? Now, one of the underlying facts that might be relevant is that we know that the PIC invested up to R1 billion in the independent group of Mr. Survey.
Again, I would perhaps refer the Commission to the processes that are followed by the PIC, and I strongly refute any allegations that I might have anything to do with that. But the processes of the PIC would also, bear testimony to what role as a chairman, and at that time personally, and what the chairman is supposed to do in that instance.
This might well be a matter that is currently being dealt with by the Mpati Commission dealing with PIC affairs. And according to press reports, that is in fact the case.
Correct.
But let's take it step by step, please. Did you have any role in bringing about the transaction which led to the investment in the independent group?
Absolutely none, sir.
What role did you play in relation to Mr. Survey and Mr. Ajay Gupta or the Gupta family?
Look, as I stated when I appeared before this commission, that around August in 2014, Mr. Gupta asked me whether an arrangement or an agreement between the PIC and Mr. Sweb would preclude their family from participating in the deal, and I was able to confirm that that was not the case, and that's about my only involvement in this matter.
Right. Would you speak up a little, please?
I'm saying, as I stated in my submission on the 3rd of October, that during August, Mr. Ajay Gupta had asked me whether an agreement between the PIC and Mr. Sweb would preclude them from participating in any arrangement with him. And I was able to explain to him that was not the case.
All right. The news report refers to a letter that you allegedly wrote to the PIC. Again, it's not a very precise allegation, but I quote, "for certain people to get the money," and it's alleged that Mr. Malema is in possession of the letter. Firstly, have you ever seen such a letter?
I have never seen such a letter, and I have no doubt that there wouldn't be such a letter, but I would again invite Mr. Malema to produce that letter because it might assist in clarifying.
Whilst you were chairman of the board of the PIC, would you have ever had occasion to write a letter to the PIC asking for people to get money?
Absolutely not.
Right. After that period, did you ever communicate in writing with the PIC? there's reference to a scandal involving your daughter. Do you know anything about that?
Not that I know of, but, any issue involving my daughter would actually be private, and, but as far as I know, there was no blackmail, but, if there is a need also to...
Again, you invite that evidence.
Absolutely.
It's also alleged that you were appointed Minister of Finance on 24 May 2014 in exchange for a promise to deliver benefits to the Guptas. Is that statement correct?
It is definitely not correct, sir. And again, if there is any evidence to that effect, it would be appreciated.
Generally, what do you say about the contents of the EFF press statements of 2 and 3 October 2018 as annexed to your statement?
Look, it's, I find it very strange, and I must say that it can only be speculation that I suspect. One, that this might have been political more than anything, and as you have seen in the statement, it does indicate that it goes further to say that there is no one who is clean in the ANC, and the only solution to this would be to remove the ANC from power and elect a revolutionary force, which is the EFF. But also, I must indicate that, well, though this is speculation, among other things that I was involved in, it is common knowledge that there was a link between the EFF and the VBS at some point where it turned out, it is common and public knowledge that Mr. Floyd Shivambu's brother benefited from the EFF.
Well, let's just pause there for a moment before we get there.
Yeah.
There was an accusation in these press reports that you failed to respond to a parliamentary question put to you by Mr. Floyd Shivambu of the EFF on 12 June 2018. Do you recall that allegation?
I do recall that allegation, and I have provided evidence that that was also not true, because the parliamentary question was responded to, and there is evidence of that.
Right, and there's an email train at pages 40 to 41 which assert the hand delivery of the response to the questions.
That is correct.
And at page 42 is a letter addressed to Mr. Shivambu, which goes on to page 45, which, on the face of it at least, responds to his questions. Is that correct?
That is correct, sir.
All right. Now, if you were asked, why do you think the EFF, or anyone else for that matter, but in this case the EFF, would want to publish allegations about you shortly before you came to this commission to give evidence?
As I said, I strongly believe that might have been an attempt at tarnishing my integrity before appearing before the commission, and therefore bring my evidence into question. But also these attacks on the National Treasury and myself in particular and other members of staff at the Treasury had actually started mounting even prior to that. And as I was beginning to indicate that it is common knowledge and public knowledge that one of Mr. Floyd Shivambu's brothers, or his brother, had benefited from the VBS matter of which...
Sorry. What was your role in relation to VBS at around this time?
Mr.
My role...
I'm sorry. Do you want to let him finish properly before you follow up? I thought you had not finished, Mr. Nene. Had you finished answering that question?
I had, but I think the second question also links quite.
All right. I just want to be
into...
sure that you have been able to answer fully.
No, I'm comfortable, Chair. Thank you. You know, my role was as Minister of Finance, putting a bank like VBS in that situation was the task of the Minister of Finance, which is what I did a few days after I had been appointed.
I'm sorry, can I ask you to
Yes.
go back to your first sentence in answer? I didn't hear some of the words in your
Starting from my role,
No,
Chair.
just the last two sentences, I think.
Okay, I said one of what I needed to do as Minister of Finance was to put, it was going to be my duty as Minister of Finance to take a decision on whether to put a bank like the VBS with its challenges under curatorship. So the
Okay.
application that was made by the governor of the central bank was sent to the Minister of Finance. And during that weekend, a few days after I had been reappointed as Minister of Finance, one of the things I had to engage with was dealing with VBS. And I have it on record here that there was an SMS that was, or a text message that was sent to me by Mr. Floyd Shibambu. And I have made a copy of the transcripts, and my legal team would be able to provide you with the transcript of that SMS. And
Yes.
if you allow me, I would, it's not very long, I can actually just read it out to you.
Yeah, you may do so, but just remind me again, when was your reappointment as Minister of Finance?
I was
February?
reappointed as Minister of Finance on the 28th of February 2018.
And soon after appointment, you received a request or application from the governor of the Reserve Bank, or when you were reappointed, it was already pending in your
The
office?
application was, when I was appointed, I'm sure the processes were underway
Okay.
because a report had already been received that the bank was facing liquidity challenges.
Yes.
But the process had not reached.
The decision had not been taken yet.
Correct.
You were going to be the person to make the decision.
Absolutely.
Okay, no, thank you. You may read the
other colleagues.
And just for
And I
the
think-
record, what was the position in regard to any influence sought to be exercised over yourself, apart from the matter you've raised in connection with Independent Group and Mr. Survey?
Other than that, I think all they needed to do was to play this, PR exercise of appearing to be good corporate citizens. And I think if they actually even made any attempt of an approach, it would have actually been contrary to the view that they had actually been, or the projection that they have been putting forward.
Did you ever have a discussion with any of the Guptas at one or other of their premises, residential or business, in regard to the launch of the television channel ANN7?
Yes, they did allude to that.
What happened?
Well, again, they told me that they are going to be launching this TV channel, and seeing that the ANC administration was under severe attack from the current media houses, they would want to launch a TV channel, and they were in the process of launching it, which would give a completely different perspective. They would give a balanced view of government, which is what, according to Mr. Ajay Gupta, was what they would want to do once the new channel has been launched.
Then, just to provide the detail insofar as the detail may be relevant, I understand from your statement that you visited the Gupta family on about 8 occasions, 6 visits while you were Deputy Minister of Finance, and 2 visits when you were Minister of Finance. And those visits were at the home in Saxonwold and at the Midrand offices.
That is correct.
Once you were Minister of Finance, did you have occasion to visit the Saxonwold home of the Guptas? And I'm at paragraph 39 of your statement.
Indeed, in 2014, as Minister of Finance, I did. And again, as I indicated, it was just casual visit.
And was it on one of those visits that you were asked to intervene in the dispute between themselves and Dr. Iqbal Survey?
That is correct.
And then the second visit?
Again, it was to respond to the matter, and I would imagine that was the last visit.
Right. You will recall at the beginning of your evidence, we referred to the email chain at page 70 of the bundle.
That's correct, Chair.
There appears there to be, at least on the face of it, some relationship between your son, Siyabonga Nene, and Duduzane Zuma in relation to a project called the Brockfontein Project. Would you tell the Chair about what you knew of that and your interactions with your son in that regard, please?
Again, this is a matter that it only came to my attention when this email was forwarded to me. It is only then that I again engaged my son, who then informed me that whilst they were looking for business opportunities, they came across this opportunity where the owners were selling a stake in the mine. They then embarked on a process of due diligence, which led them to not proceed with the transaction because the mine was overpriced and a number of things that would not have made business sense.
So did your, firstly, this series of emails, as they appear on page 70, were they drawn to the attention of yourself and your legal representatives by the Commission legal team?
That's correct.
Right. And you were asked then by your legal team to respond to this issue that had been raised by the legal team of the Commission?
That's correct.
And you say that, as I understand it, there was, in fact, according to your son at least, contemplation of a project involving your son and Duduzane Zuma and perhaps others called the Brakfontein Project.
That is correct.
But it never eventuated.
No, it didn't.
Why did you resign after giving evidence, Mr. Nene?
Chair, you would recall that after my appearance, UNCA played a previous interview which I had given a few years ago, where I had not disclosed my formal engagements with the Gupta family. And I felt that the office that I occupied should remain beyond reproach, and its integrity should be unquestioned. Having realized that I did not respond honestly in my previous interview with the NCA after my dismissal from the position in 2015, I felt that it was inappropriate of me. You know, if it wasn't a position of minister, perhaps would have asked for special leave so that I have time to clear my name. But I felt that due to the nature of, this impropriety of having not been honest at that time, and although I say this question came as an ambush question, as I always put it, from a journalist who otherwise had indicated that the discussion was only going to about what I'm doing after my dismissal. And I had thought that it was not the appropriate time for me to discuss some of these issues. But when the question arose, I think I took an easy way of not being honest at that time. And I felt that it is inappropriate for a person occupying my position, as I first issued a public apology, and after that public apology, judging by how unforgiving South Africans are, I felt, I would rather vacate the position and make life easy for the president rather than, because as I say, if it was another position, I would have asked for special leave. But being a minister appointed by the president, I'd rather make life easy for the president and ask the president to release me.
Did you consult the president in relation to your resignation?
I did. Over that weekend, I made several attempts to get hold of the president, who was not reachable until the Monday after. You would know, Chair, as it appears in the statement, that during that Monday or Tuesday, I was supposed to be traveling to Bali for an IMF World Bank meetings as a representative of the country. I felt that it would be inappropriate of me to leave the country on such an important trip and assignment, having not cleared this with the president. And in my attempt to reach the president, the communication was very clear that whatever it is that we do should be in the best interest of the country. And I would strongly believe that with this cloud hanging over my head, perhaps I should vacate the position. But the president was unreachable until the Monday. When he did come back to me, I shared this with him, and he said I must give him a bit of time, and then he returned and said, with a heavy heart, he agrees with me, perhaps he should accept my resignation.
Mr. Nene, your statement, public statement to fellow South Africans is at page 47 and 48 of the bundle. If you wish to, I'm going to invite you to read it, because you deal there with at least two questions raised in relation to your relationship with the Guptas that we've discussed in evidence. The fact that they were visited at their private residence, and secondly, at the time in relation to at least some of the visits when there was public controversy regarding the Guptas. So if you wish to read it onto the record, it'll take a minute. You may.
Would you want me to read the entire?
Well, certainly
Yeah.
paragraphs 2 and 3.
Yeah. Well, in this media statement, I said part of my duty as a public office bearer is to meet fellow South Africans and other stakeholders when they request to do so. However, I was wrong in meeting the Guptas at their residence and not in my office, or at least a public place. I say this being mindful of the fact that it is quite common practice, not only in South Africa but globally, for public office bearers to attend gatherings, including dinners at residences of business people, fellow politicians, and other stakeholders. But context matters. As soon as I became aware of the controversy swirling around the family's business dealings, I should, subject to there being a legitimate reason for doing so, have met the Guptas at my office, accompanied, as is customary, by a Ministry of Finance or National Treasury official. In return for the trust and faith that you have placed on me, I owe you conduct as a public office bearer that is beyond reproach. But I'm human too. I do make mistakes, including those of poor judgment. However, it is reasonable of the public to expect public office bearers to own up fully and timeously to the mistakes they make in the course of carrying out their public duties. I should also have disclosed early and fully the details of these meetings, in particular those that took place in Saxonwold.
In that paragraph, you set a standard that you say you should have adhered to and public office bearers should adhere to. And then in the final paragraph of the statement of paragraph on page 48, you encourage anyone who has evidence in regard to the work of this commission to come forward and hand it over to the commission. Do you see that?
That's correct, sir.
A question that has been raised, and perhaps I'm preempting a question that you would ask, Chair, so stop me if I am.
No, continue.
The invitation has been made several times by the Chair for people in government and people who have been members of the executive to come forward to the Commission and to tell the Commission what they know of the matters which this Commission is investigating. The response has been present but hardly overwhelming. Can you explain from your own experiences why this should be so?
You mean why the other office bearers are not coming forward?
Well, not in the quantity that the Chair, I think, would have liked, and the Chair has expressed that very sentiment this morning in a public interview.
Well, I can only speculate again, Chair, that we're not wired the same. There is always a price to pay, and I don't think we're all prepared to pay the price. We also have, having taken the oath of office to be conscientious in what we do, our consciences might also not necessarily be the same to lead us to come forward and own up if there is any wrongdoing on your part. But also there is, I would want to say that there is fear of, the positions at times become more important than us. The titles we are given, some of us would want to die for, it becomes therefore difficult for some of us. I'm merely speculating, Chair. But also for fear of retribution and what might come as a result of that. And, I always believe that there is nothing as liberating as being able to go to bed with a conscience that you can live with. But also, we are parents. You do also want to be able to say to your kids, if there is anything untoward that you have done, own up so that we can move on. And I don't think I can be able to do that if I don't own up myself. So I don't have a direct answer to your question, but I think, as a nation, these are some of the things that if we want to build a society, we should all do some introspection into how we conduct ourselves.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nene. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Pretorius. I am going to want to talk more on the last topic that Mr. Pretorius asked you a question on. But before that, I just want to ask a few questions in regard to other aspects of your evidence. You said that you have been able to establish that you visited the Gupta residence 8 times.
Right.
Is that right?
About 8 times.
Yes. 6 times when you were Deputy Minister of Finance, and 2 times when you were Minister of Finance.
That's correct, Chair.
Yes. Now, that seems to me to be quite a few times, and I think you used the word several times a while ago, and each time at their residence. Is that right?
Each time at their residence, but also I think that includes the visits to their businesses.
But
yeah.
basically at their places.
Mostly.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. Now, that may be concerning to some people to say, wasn't that too many times? What would you say if anybody thought along those lines?
Chair, I might say that, as I said earlier, that perhaps it is in the spirit of being accessible, and I can attest to, I can say without fear of contradiction that there are other, business people I might have visited more than those times, because I did not see anything wrong in visiting them. Of course, with the controversy around them, I think, around this particular family, I do think, and it is for that reason that I say, perhaps I could have, limited that. But if you get an invitation from somebody, as I say, I don't think it's just the visit that matters. I think it is what comes out of the visit that matters. And if I'm invited to your house, Chair, and we have a casual chat about what you do, especially people who would always say, look, I'm in this kind of a business, and this is, my contribution to the economy. But I would like us, to have a conversation because of my experience in business, because of my close proximity to government in terms of advising, the president economically. So it is important to hear those people out, but not necessarily that. And I can assure you that it was, for me, there never was a real issue with whether we can engage or not. But I never got that advice, except things like when you talk about a deficit, that, your officials are too concerned with a deficit. Countries run as huge deficits as they possibly can. You don't have to be concerned so much about the deficit. And with the little experience that I had, I would actually be able to, have such a discussion and explain the reason why a huge deficit can be a risk and what is it that we are doing as a country. But other than that, a casual discussion that, translates into some kind of engaging with regards to how the economy is run. For me, I thought it is something one could handle. Of course, the number of visits, and as I say, that on hindsight, perhaps I could have limited that.
Well, I think you are right to say, in principle, a visit to somebody, even at their residence, as a minister, on its own, should not be a problem. But I think in the context of this family, there may be part of the concern might be in the minds of some South Africans might be that we have had evidence in this commission, for example, and I think it was in the media even before this commission, that members of this family would sometimes boast that they call ministers to their residence whenever. So partly when one has regard to evidence or allegations along those lines, one then gets concerned if there are many visits to that family. You understand where part of the concern may be. It might not be just a visit, but the more visits there are to the family in the context of allegations such as this, then the greater the concern might be. Do you understand that?
No, I accept that, Chair, but I think the point I was making earlier was that prior to the commission and prior to some of the evidence that has surfaced, other than the media reports, you actually would not be able to say, we think you guys are guilty of an act of impropriety. And therefore, it was the difficulty one had was of how do you then suddenly, when you get a call, all of a sudden you say, no, I can't come to you, you guys are, in the media as having done X, Y, Z, but with no evidence. But at the same time, as I said, that the
Few minutes. Okay, maybe it's what you said.
whatever it is, I won't repeat it.
Okay, let's continue. You were making the point that they were saying whatever you read or you heard in the media about them, the allegations, they were not true.
That is correct, Chair. And of course, at that time, I thought that when people keep on inviting you, you wouldn't even know whether you are even being filmed as one of those people that are, the regulars here. And your name could have even been used to say, look, he's a frequent visitor here. So all of that, I don't think one was alive to what the consequences of that might be. There is a lot of name dropping. When people drop your name and there is evidence that you are a frequent visitor here, it makes sense, which might have been the reason why you get invited, just in order to demonstrate that, I've got him on my side. But without necessarily asking for any favor from you, but making sure that as long as you are a regular here, then I can always drop your name.
But you did stop accepting invitations from them, and when you stopped, I guess nothing had been proved in court about them.
I did, Chair, and I must
So
say
why
that.
did you stop?
And I must say that it was on realization that perhaps it is indeed not appropriate, because it couldn't continue indefinitely. This was now, as I said, in 2013 there was an investigation already on the dairy farm.
Christina,
Yes, on the dairy farm. But again, in 2014, and as I said, when I decline an invitation, it wouldn't be just declining an invitation because I think you guys are corrupt. It would actually be very polite. You know, I'm unavailable because of the work schedule as well. Excuse me, as minister then, which was different when one was deputy minister. But as minister, the responsibilities were, you know, also much more heavier. But it would be very polite declining. I'm not too sure whether, if they had persisted, I perhaps wouldn't have again paid one or two visits again. But yeah.
You know, what I want to understand is, for a certain period of time, part of the explanation you gave for going there was your desire to be accessible, number one. Number two, saying that, you know, there may have been allegations against the family in the media, but nothing had been proved in court as yet. And therefore, you know, your attitude was, well, there is nothing wrong with the visits as such, as long as you didn't do anything improper during those visits. So, but I'm saying that then at a certain stage you decided, no, I'm not accepting the invitations anymore from them. So had that view changed about, about saying, look, the allegations haven't been proved?
Look, the allegations were actually getting stronger and stronger, Chair, and one needed to actually draw a line as to how long you actually would want to be associated with people who are always in the media for the wrong reasons. But again, as I said, it would be a very polite declining of the invitation, with the hope that they wouldn't draw any inferences with regards to whether I have already found them guilty, because I had not. But I felt, you know, there needs to be a line. You need to find the right balance between being accessible, but also between being accessible and your accessibility being abused for reasons that you believe might actually arise out of that.
Yes, the investigation that was conducted by the National Treasury, which I think you said was in 2013, when was it concluded? Do you remember? And what was the outcome of the?
I am not sure, other than what ended up being in the public domain as well. But
Yes.
I'm not sure whether because once the investigation had been concluded by the National Treasury, where whatever wrongdoings had been identified had then to be referred to the law enforcement agencies to deal with the matter. I wouldn't have the dates, but I would imagine that the National Treasury would be able to provide us with the dates.
Would National Treasury, after concluding the investigation, have briefed you on what had been found, or would they not?
Chair, I cannot recall whether there was, because there were a number of investigations that the National Treasury was working on, and I'm not sure whether, I can't recall a briefing on this particular one.
On it, yeah.
Not on this particular one.
Yeah, but But normally, is it something that they wouldn't do when they've done certain investigations to make sure that the minister is briefed before maybe anything goes to law enforcement agencies?
Yes, under normal
Normally they would
circumstances,
do
yes.
that.
That's correct.
You just don't remember whether in this particular case
That's
they
correct.
did it. Yeah.
Yes.
Now, with the 8 visits, my understanding of your evidence is that the Gupta family never asked you to do anything for them, really. Is that right?
That's correct, other than the one that I mentioned where they
Yes.
wanted me to clarify.
Yes,
yes. Yeah.
yes. And these meetings, or the visits, when you visited them, it was just discussions on on the economic situation or other issues connected with the economy and so on, and maybe personal issues. Or I just wonder how we can describe the topics that were being discussed, because the evidence that I have heard from some witnesses suggests that they were very vigorous in trying to get government business, that is the Gupta family. So I'm just wanting to establish the kinds of issues they discussed with you, what they were other than issues of the economy.
Look, as I said earlier, I think it would have been difficult for them to talk about any business with government after they have portrayed themselves as not doing business with government. And I would want to believe that they wanted me to also buy into the story, so that even if I hear issues of them having done business with government, I would be under the impression that, but they don't do business with government. So I don't think they would have been able to say anything about doing business with government. But other than that, Chair, they would actually be very casual, and I know for a fact that trying to promote their publications. I remember in one of the engagements, there was a request that I do a piece in their magazine, The Thinker, which is, still in publication, And I don't remember where we left that matter, but it was one of the discussions that, it would be good to do a piece that would feature in their publication. But also when their newspaper was in circulation, it would also be one of those opportunities to market themselves. As you see, the stories that we write in our publication are presenting a different narrative from what we see in the media in general, which means we are a patriotic publishing house, but also that it is important for the public to get this different view. So it would actually range from those issues without any particular matter, other than on specific ones, like I said. When one was invited to the Sahara business to show how many youngsters they employ that are in the technology space, and what they produce, and what what their contribution is to the economy, both in terms of building this young and nurture this young talent, but at the same time promote business.
Do you recall your first visit to them? Do you recall how that came about? Or what the reason was? Did somebody phone you and invite you? Was there a formal invitation for some function? How did that come about, if you recall?
The first visit arose, I think, out of the encounter that we had at one of the government functions.
While you were deputy minister?
Whilst I was deputy minister, yes.
Yes.
When he introduced himself and told me what he does, and then indicated that we must meet for tea sometime.
Yes.
Yes, and
Yes.
then I got a call sometime later.
Yes.
I think a few months or a few days later, inviting me for tea. And,
Yes.
yeah.
On the other occasions, what was the reason given for the invitation?
It actually would be. I would say it's been some time we haven't met.
Yeah.
Do you mind popping in for tea?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
It would always be popping in.
Something along those lines.
Absolutely.
Yes. Yes. Now, I had evidence from Mr. Maseko last year in this commission, where if his evidence is true, what appeared to have happened is that the Gupta family was really fighting hard to get more government business. And if his evidence is true, they even, or one of the Gupta brothers, threatened him or made a statement to the effect that either they would sort him out or they would deal with him. And my recollection of Mr. Masego's evidence is that the circumstances under which that statement was made, according to Mr. Masego, were that they must have seen him as not cooperating with them to make sure that they got business, more government business. And that was early in 2011. That was early in 2011. And Mr. Masego's evidence further suggested, was to the effect that when he was subsequently moved, I think in October or thereabout 2010, a threat was made or a statement was made that he would be dealt with or he would be sorted out. And in late January or early February of 2011, he was transferred from the GCIS, where he was Director General, and he was transferred to DPSA, Department of Public Service and Administration, in a rush. And his evidence was that he heard from his then minister, Minister Chabane, that the former President Zuma had called from outside the country, because he had been outside of the country, and had called and had a conversation with Minister Chabane. And according to Mr. Masego, Minister Chabane told him that the former president had said to him, by the time he came back, Mr. Masego should no longer be there as Director General of GCIS. And Mr. Masego made it clear that at no stage had either the former president or Minister Chabane complained about his job, his performance, and he said Minister Chabane was very sympathetic to him, and he actually said something to the effect that he was feeling for him because he knew he had not done anything wrong. And he said he would try and organize something for him, and an arrangement was made in terms of which Mr. Masego was transferred to be DG of DPSA, and according to Mr. Masego, the transfer was all done so quickly that the Minister of DPSA at that time, Minister Baloyi, apparently had not even been consulted. Mr. Masego might have said he doubted that Minister Baloyi was consulted. I'm not sure, but that's what had happened, and that was 2011. So if that evidence is true, then, and I don't know if it's true, I will decide that much later. If that evidence is true, then already in 2011, this family was acting very vigorously in getting government business. And indeed, maybe were intimidating and threatening people who seemed to stand in their way, and trying to make sure that they were removed. And actually, it was Mr. Masego who testified that when he had a meeting with Mr. Ajay Gupta at Saxon World, I think he said Mr. Gupta made a statement to the effect that they call ministers to their residence, and actually that the former president would do what they wanted. I hope I'm remembering the evidence correctly. So, if that evidence given by Mr. Masego is true, would it not be strange that when they had the opportunity of meeting with the Minister of Finance, they would not want to talk to him about, getting business or facilitating things, maybe particularly because I also had evidence, now I can't remember from whom, which suggested that Treasury was seen as a stumbling block in regard to certain issues, and you may well have been given evidence to that effect as well. So I'm just looking at this. I wonder what your comment could be on this. So it just, one would expect that people, if this evidence by Mr. Masego is true, people who acted like that already in 2011 would really want to talk business with the Minister of Finance if they were talking business with other government officials and so on.
I think, as I said earlier, I think it was their style of playing differently with different ministers. As we explained also what the role of the Treasury is, I think it would be difficult for anybody to think that you can influence the Treasury, because the best way of doing that would be to influence a department that would be approaching the Treasury, rather than trying to influence the Treasury, because the Treasury normally does not initiate processes. Treasury would be approached by various departments. And I think one of the reasons why I think it would be difficult for them to do that is precisely because of the image they were trying to project, that they don't do business with government, and that they are this good corporate citizen. So that, I think in their minds, it was that if anything comes to the Treasury, if you are a good, if you are in good terms with them, then you would be, you'd have a soft heart if anything comes your way. But they never got around to be able to say exactly what they would, and I would imagine that they would either depend on the ministers they have spoken to, or in some instances, perhaps that the former president would do their betting. And in our view, we actually had very clear processes of dealing with things, and focusing on the processes would actually be our best line of defense. It is only after Deputy Minister Jonas's story that when he came to me in 2015, when he actually explained what they had said because of my refusal to do something which I didn't know they had anything to do with. So my question was, but they said, in my view, this had nothing to do with them. It's a matter that we were dealing with the former president and not them. So if they now are in a position to be able to advocate for my removal only because of that refusal, it actually sounded very strange. But from their side, I think they actually steered away from trying to influence directly, rather than using either the other ministries or perhaps even the presidency to get through to the National Treasury to...
Subject to the question of roundabout when it was when you started declining their invitations, one would have expected that their thinking would have been, we need to approach the Minister of Finance rather than the Deputy Minister if we want somebody who is going to help us. Why go to the Deputy Minister? But of course, if they had tried with the Minister of Finance and failed, one could understand them going to the Deputy Minister, because by then they would be wanting to have the Minister of Finance removed. But somehow one would have thought that at some stage they would have tried with the Minister of Finance before they went to the Deputy Minister. But you say they never tried.
They didn't try, and I think they probably must have got the word from the highest office that there is no way you're going to crack this one. I mean, I'm not sure. I don't want to claim to be that powerful, but I suspect that that was the only reason why they felt if it can't be cracked from the highest office, then they must find other ways. But yeah.
Well, the other point I want to raise is this. You said also in your evidence that I think part of the reason why you went to see them was that you didn't want to antagonize the boss's friends. Now, I'm a little surprised by that, because the impression I got from your evidence last time was that you would stand up to even those friends' boss when you thought that you were not comfortable with doing something like the nuclear deal. You would stand your ground even when it was clear to you what he wanted, which direction he wanted the whole thing to go. You would stand your ground. So I wonder whether that can be reconciled with Mr. Nene, with that kind of Mr. Nene, namely going to the visits because you don't want to antagonize them, whether that can be reconciled with the Mr. Nene who, according to the evidence I had last year, in Russia stands his ground and comes back even here, stands his ground against the nuclear deal.
Yeah. Again, Chair, I think it depends on whether they had raised anything, because if they had, I would have stood up. But having not raised anything directly with me, there was nothing to stand one's ground, to stand my ground on, because if there was nothing put on the table that this is perhaps the favor we would want you to do for us, I would have been able to deal with that. But having these light conversations without knowing what the underlying motive might have been, one wouldn't have actually just simply decided, no, I'm not having a conversation with you, unless if they raised something which I think was in conflict with my principles and what the law requires of us to do.
No, I think my point is this. When you say, as I understand you have said, I honored these visits, these invitations, I'm not going to say wholly because you didn't want to antagonize the boss's friends, but maybe in part because you didn't want to antagonize the boss's friends. That can only mean because you think the boss's friend will talk to the boss if he is unhappy with you, and there may be some consequences. Otherwise, I wouldn't understand why that would be a factor to you. In other words, the nene that I heard about last year in regard to the nuclear deal would only have honored these invitations if he thought there was nothing wrong, not because he thought, I don't want to antagonize the boss's friends. I thought that nene would have said, well, let the boss's friend be antagonized if he's antagonized. If I'm uncomfortable going to his residence, I'm not going.
Yeah, but maybe as you're saying, Chair, I might have put it badly in just saying that could be the only reason. That was not necessarily the only reason.
No, you didn't say it's the only reason.
Yes,
no,
but,
you didn't say that.
yeah,
but I'm nevertheless.
Yeah, but it was one of those things where you think why, because there is nothing that you think is behind the invitation. Would you want to do that? If these people are in a good relationship with your boss, why would you all of a sudden say, I can't accept your invitation? But I do think that perhaps, it's the manner in which, it came across, but that's not necessarily the only reason.
Yes, no, that's fine. Then the other question before we talk about the last topic that you dealt with is, did you understand why this family was so interested in having this good image to you, that they are good corporate citizens and they were not doing business with government, which on the evidence that I have heard, if it is true, could not have been true as at the time that you were Minister of Finance, because already, if that evidence is true, already in 2011 they had some business and government business, and they wanted more. Did you have an understanding why it was so important to them that they should have this image with you, that they are good corporate citizens and they are not doing business with government?
I think it was a matter of actually getting a person in my position to understand things differently other than what is portrayed in the public domain, and portray themselves as these good corporate citizens, when indeed it is clear that they were not. But at that time, as I said earlier, other than the media reports, most of the stuff had not been tested in any given environment like we do have the evidence now.
So as at 2014, when you became Minister of Finance, maybe 2015, depending on when you stopped accepting their invitations, you were not aware that they were doing business with government. You accepted what they told you that
with government entities. No,
yes.
I didn't have any evidence of that.
Oh, no, that's fine. Then on the last topic that you dealt with, when Mr. Pretorius was asking you questions, it is indeed quite difficult to attract as many people, particularly in government, who ought to know quite a lot of things that happen, to come forward. As Mr. Pretorius indicated, there have been a number of people who have come forward, and you are one of them. You came forward without any hesitation last year, and you supported the commission, and there are other ministers who have come forward, past and present. But when one has regard to the numbers of ministers, people who have served as ministers during some of the years that we're talking about, and at the moment, one thinks that there ought to be, a much greater number of ministers who have come forward, and directors generals, past and present, who have come forward and said, no, I know something, I want to help the commission, I want the commission to get to the bottom of what was happening. So it is quite difficult, and you have given some of the reasons that you think might be behind that. We'll be going to elections, and some of the people who are ministers who probably know something and should have come forward might well continue to be ministers, and it is difficult to accept that out of so many ministers who have not come forward, there aren't any who really know things that happened that should be brought to the commission. And it is a pity, because they should be, because of their leadership role and the positions they occupy, they should be exemplary to the rest of the people of South Africa. I don't know, you might know, I don't know whether there is a possibility that some of the people who know something and should be coming forward don't come forward because maybe if they give evidence, they might be seen to be putting their organization or their government in a bad light. I know that the ruling party has said many times that people must come forward. The president has said many times that people must come forward, but they are not coming forward in the numbers in which one would expect them to come forward. But I guess that you have said what you have said, and you appreciate the difficulty. And you, among other things, you think people might be the feeling that they might lose jobs and so on. Yeah.
Yes, Chair. I think that what I've said is about all I can say on this matter, because I said we're not wired the same, but also that for some of us, our positions and our titles are actually much more important than us as human beings. And you know, when we are without these titles, perhaps we are nothing. Forgetting that at the end of the day, we actually acquire these titles for a reason, and that's why we actually take an oath, which we should live by. Our constitution and our oath of office should actually be the guiding principle. But at times, and as I said earlier, we are able to, and perhaps this is one of the reasons why I always say I wouldn't make a very good politician, because I do not believe in the language that says I was quoted out of context. I believe in having not been honest, and there is a need to be honest. But I also, coming forward to assist a commission like this is an opportunity for our country, you know, to deal with the issues of the past and be able to move forward. And I think it is indeed tragic that we are not getting many of our colleagues coming forward. But again, as I said earlier, that South Africa is very unforgiving. So if you are prepared to pay the price that your fellow colleague has paid, you can join in. But if you are not prepared to pay that price, you might as well stay far from this commission unless you are subpoenaed. Well, that's unfortunately the position.
And it is very possible that part of the reason why certain things happened and happened the way they did, in the proportions in which they did in this country, and for as long as they happened, it is possible that part of the reason is that people who could have made a difference, who could have helped to stop certain things happening, did not stand up because they may have been concerned about the kinds of things that you have just mentioned. And now there is an opportunity, there is a commission which seeks to find out exactly what happened, who could have helped to stop things, and they know things that happened that were wrong, and some of them may have taken the oath, some of them may be going around and saying they have the best interests of South Africa in their hearts, but here is an opportunity for them to come forward, and they are not coming forward. And people want to help rebuild the country, and people are not coming forward because maybe they are just concerned about, among others, the things that you're talking about. It's a great pity.
I couldn't agree with you more, Deputy Chief Justice.
No, I don't know if there's anything, Mr. Pretorius, that
two issues. As it's a matter of some controversy, both within the Commission and outside in the public eye, I'd just like to summarize with Mr. Nene at least a view of questions that we've asked both on the first occasion now and the questions that you've covered.
Yes.
And then I'd like to put a request before you on behalf of Ms. Hassim, and I'll deal with that second.
Okay.
Mr. Nene, just to summarize the position in regard to the visits to the Guptas. We know of 8 visits to residents and business of the Guptas. We know that those visits were made alone, and at least in relation to some of the visits at a time when controversy surrounded the Gupta's business dealings. We know those as facts. You have said that various topics were discussed, including the Iqbal survey interaction. But you've said, and I think this is the crucial point around which some controversy arises, you've said that no influence was sought to be exercised over you by the Guptas.
Correct.
Now, in relation to that, we have no evidence to the contrary. The only evidence that we have of what happened during those visits is your evidence, and it's perhaps unlikely that we will get any other evidence to the contrary. We have, though, evidence from, amongst others, Mrs. Maseko Jonas and Ms. Mentor, which is evidence which would strongly suggest that it is very improbable that when you visited the Gupta residences and businesses, no attempt would have been made to exercise influence over you. And you've given your explanations in regard to that. Of course, the legal team can only put that to you as evidence rather than as factual findings of the Commission, because those factual findings haven't been made. But we must conclude that there is at least a question mark, albeit a qualified question mark, concerning the probabilities as to whether influence was sought to be exercised or not. And that's as far as we can take it, and I presume you will accept that that question mark must remain.
Absolutely. I don't have a problem with that, Chair, but I would imagine, perhaps linked to the point you made earlier with not enough people coming forward, because I would have thought that the approach that the family used to me might have been used on some of my colleagues, but who have not come forward because you're not getting enough of that. Because if there are some of my colleagues who are willing to come forward to testify that they were only, invited for casual visits and were not asked for any favors or coerced to do anything, that would have helped. But it is unfortunate that I also can't, be able to encourage. And I actually would want to use this platform to encourage some people who actually might have had similar experiences like the one I did, because that would help to put this into perspective, because I have no doubt that I can't be the exception, the only exception to not being coerced, but being used, to project a completely different
That's an
view of
avenue
the
that we might well explore then.
Absolutely.
Chair, I have a request from Ms. Hassim to ask 3 questions. The regulations do allow re-examination. Technically, this wouldn't be re-examination, but we would support it.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be very brief.
Thank you.
Mr. Nene, did you attend the wedding of a Gupta family member?
No, I did not.
Why did you not?
That was in 2013. Exactly as I said, that was the time when I began to be, wary of the relationship with the family.
Did you receive an invitation to the wedding?
I did, yes.
Are you aware of any other of your colleagues, government officials, who did attend the wedding?
I think there's a parliamentary record where there was a question that was posed in Parliament that would be useful, that there were people that attended.
And what did you understand at the time when you first visited the Gupta family? What did you understand to be their relationship with former President Zuma?
Well, it is public knowledge, and they themselves said this themselves. It was public knowledge that they were friends to the former president, and the president had also gone public to say that they were his friends, who had offered his son a job when nobody wanted to employ him. So I did understand them to be very close to the president.
Were they advisors to the president in any form?
He did say that they do play an advisory role in terms of the economy.
Did you have any personal expectations from these visits?
Not really, other than, as I said, that for me being accessible is one of the things that I actually, do without at times checking even the blind spots. And on hindsight, I would really think that perhaps, as I said, I could have avoided that.
Did you receive any payment or gifts from the Gupta family?
No, I did not.
Did the Gupta family or any one of the Guptas offer you the position of Minister of Finance?
No, I was not offered by the Guptas any position.
And are you satisfied as we stand and sit here today that your conscience is clear? Is there anything else you'd like to say in relation to your resignation?
Crystal clear.
Those are my questions.
Thank you very much. Nothing further, Mr. Pretorius?
Yes, Chair.
Okay, all right.
There are 3 minutes to go.
But you say you have nothing further to ask.
Nothing further.
Okay. Mr. Nene, thank you very much for coming back to the commission. From what I was told earlier on, it appears that nobody has applied for leave to cross-examine you as yet, although what I was told suggests that maybe Ms. Jumat Peterson did write letters that may suggest that maybe she might want, I'm not sure, she might want to, but she has not submitted any application. So you are excused. Maybe we won't ask you to come back. Maybe we will, but you are excused, and thank you very much for coming.
Thank you, Deputy Chief Justice.
Thank you, thank you. We have nothing further for today.
No, Chair.
And tomorrow it's Mr. Jonas's evidence.
Yes, Chair.
And is he the only witness tomorrow?
Thus far, Chair,
Yeah.
I was previously informed that he may well take the whole day. I've received a message
Yeah.
from Mr. McQuena who says that might not be the case, but at the very least there's no need for the Chair to start early.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe we can just start at 9:30 that I fixed for this week at the request of the legal team, and then we'll see when we finish.
As you please, Chair.
Yeah. We'll adjourn then the proceedings for today, and we will start at 9:30 tomorrow morning. We adjourn.
Sonoma.